You love that worship? All my life, he's been faithful. Amen. I love it. I love it. I love it. How are you today? By the way, before I get into things, let me just re-emphasize an unenthusiastic Matt when it came to ugly Christmas sweater Sunday. That is an important day for us. So bring it. I mean, bring it. We might even have a little something for the best one of the day. So bring your ugly, and it doesn't have to be ugly. It can be Christmassy kind of sweater, whatever. So do that. All right? Not this Sunday, not today, not next Sunday. Yes, thank you. 2 weeks. All right, you are an interactive group today, so I'm going to move on before I get in trouble, right? So we're in this series called The Miracle of Christmas, and I love it because I get to spend a lot of time just kind of living in it during the week. And for me, I'm already been where I hope you go today because it's a wonderful place as we begin to look at an interesting part of a miracle and miracles of Christmas. When it comes to miracles, there are some, excuse me, big miracles that, grab our attention and, man, just overwhelm us, and we know for sure, man, that was an absolute miracle. And then there are some miracles that, for whatever reason, seem like less spectacular, and honestly, a lot of them often get overlooked. Would you agree with that? So when it comes to miracles, do you realize that every day, really every second, you're experiencing a miracle? Let me convince you more, because if I said that and you knowing what I'm about to say, you would go, amazing. All right? So keep that word in your reference pile, because I'm going to take you somewhere right now. Like the song that we just sang 2 songs ago, that song, I love living in it. When you think about that line, 1, 2, 3, 4, I can't even count them all. That's how our lives should be lived, really, is recognizing the miracles of God in our life every day. Occasionally the big ones, but all the time the ones that are less maybe spectacular, but ones that we should look into. So every day we could say 1, 2, 3, 4, Lord. I can't even count them all. Albert Einstein, remember him? He said this: there are only 2 ways to live your life. One is as if nothing is a miracle. The other is as if everything is a miracle. Pretty good wisdom, right? We can live as if nothing's a miracle, or we can live as if everything is a miracle. Some people may say, you may say even, how do you experience the recognition of miracles in my life every day? Because honestly, we can go through some days and say, man, I don't know about that day. It was kind of a bad day. But I want you to know, even on your bad days, even on your worst day, there are a lot of miracles that happen in your life. So let's take one, for example. It's just one. Oxygen. Thank you. Thank you. Next one, come from your heart, please. Oxygen. By the end of this sermon, and the sermon does have an end, you will inhale and exhale approximately 250 times. Possibly a few more for those moments when I wow you and you take a extra breath, but typically 250 times. So I want you to today to, and I'm going to stick to my notes here so I get it accurate, consider the journey of what we will refer to as the oxygen atom, okay? So the journey begins when air passes through your nose where unwanted dust and debris is filtered out. It's true. And I have an amazing filtering system, by the way. And then it moves past your nose. In fact, here's an interesting thing. The average person moves 440 cubic feet of air per day through the nose. Then it goes into your trachea and then ultimately into your lungs. Once it's in the lungs, check this out. The oxygen atoms hitchhike with hemoglobin and travel throughout the entire human body through your blood vessels. Sounding like a doctor now, I don't know. That's why I'm sticking to my notes, because I don't do any malpractices here today. So that oxygen atom hooks on with the hemoglobin and goes into your blood vessels and travels through your blood vessels. You with me? Here's the thing that will blow you away. You ready for this? In those blood vessels in your body, where this oxygen atom is traveling with the hemoglobin, as it travels through your blood vessels, those blood vessels in an average adult body, if you would be able to remove them and link them end to end, I want you to know this. This will blow your mind. I still can't get it in my mind. The distance, you ready for this? Would be 100,000 miles. 100,000 miles. And I verified this multiple places. There are some that say 60,000 miles, but most average around 100,000 miles. So to put that into perspective, the blood vessels just in your body could wrap the earth 4 times. 4 times. Just what's in your body. So when you breathe, it gets filtered. That oxygen atom attaches to your hemoglobin and then starts traveling through your veins, 100,000 miles of your veins. And at the end of the journey, the oxygen atom enters individual cells, bonds with the food we eat, and releases energy. Whoa! Yeah. In his article called The Miracle of Breath, James Robison writes this. He says, Webster's dictionary defines a miracle as an extraordinary, unusual wonder or marvel. Isn't a bloodstream 100,000 miles long in a small body an unusual wonder? It's the journey of an oxygen atom, a true marvel. He says, we don't need supernatural events to experience a miracle. All we need to do is breathe. The human breath is sacred. Cherish your breathing. It's the miraculous gift of life. Look what it says in Acts 17:25. He, God himself, gives everyone life and what? And everything else. Literally, you're a walking, talking, breathing miracle. The average person, check this out, will take 23,000 breaths a day. So every day, there are 23,000 miracles happening to you, just in one angle of miracles. incredible. Incredible. But we don't ever think about that, right? Remember Ralph Waldo Emerson? He said, the invariable mark of wisdom is to see the miraculous in the common. To see the miraculous in the common. You see, 1, 2, 3, 4. End of the day, we can't even count them all. What God is doing just through oxygen in our lives. So when it comes to Christmas and the Christmas story, I want you to know it's easy, and as I'm looking deeper and deeper into this, and I've preached a lot on Christmas through the years, but as we look into Christmas, it's easy to push through certain parts of the story of Christmas and not stop to consider the miraculous. Because the Christmas story, as well as all the stories of the Bible, but specifically now we're looking at the Christmas story, it is full of miracles. This is really the case when it comes to Matthew 1 in the genealogy of Jesus leading to his birth. The thing is, when it comes to the Bible, especially some of the Old Testament passages, and certainly Matthew chapter 1, we don't often like reading genealogies, right? In the Old Testament, so-and-so begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so, you know how it goes? And then in Matthew chapter 1, as we're learning about the Christmas story, then it starts out with the genealogy of Jesus. So we kind of dance right through it, usually when we're trying to get to the core of the story, you know, and how Mary, you know, a virgin became pregnant, all that part, but we kind of blow through the genealogy. In fact, when we read the Christmas story, which we do as a family traditionally all our lives, we don't read the genealogy part. We jump right down to the latter part of the chapter and get into the Christmas story. But genealogy is part of the Christmas story. And so today I want to look at that. I want to read at least the first 14 generations and really focus on a few of those generations. But I want you to first note the conclusion of the genealogy of Jesus as noted in Matthew chapter 1. Look at verse 17. It says, thus there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and then 14 from the exile to the Messiah. So a lot of generations leading into the birth of Jesus. So let's read the first 14 generations in chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. Look what it says. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac, the father of Jacob. Jacob, the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah, the father of Perez and Zeroth, whose mother was Tamar. Perez, the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Aminadab. Aminadab, the father of Nahshon. Nahshon, the father of Salmon. And then check this section out. That's where we're going to focus today. Salmon, the father of Boaz, who was the mother of Rahab. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. And Obed, the father of Jesse. And Jesse, the father of King David. So we're going to focus on that yellow section of Scripture that you see there that's also highlighted in your outline today. To see the miracle that is contained in just those two verses of the genealogy leading to Jesus. You know, one of the cool things is that when Jesus decided, you know, what he wanted to leave behind for us and for us to have full reveal about what he wanted, you know, as the most important stuff to keep in the sacred Bible. It's interesting that the first thing in the Gospel of Matthew is this genealogy. And it's honestly not just to say, oh, it's cool to see this one's connected to this one, that one connected to that, and we figure out the pattern from here to there. There are stories embedded in those names and miraculous stories in those names. I mean, we literally could do a 3-6 month series just on getting into the stories of each of these people that are mentioned in the genealogy. But today we're just going to highlight a couple that are in verses 5 and 6. So if we're going to do that in the verses 5 and 6, basically looking at the fact that Salmon was the father of Boaz, who is the mother of Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. If we're going to focus on that and a little bit about their story, we have to go to the story. So we're going to go back to the story that's contained in the book of Ruth in the Old Testament. Let me get you familiar with a few characters, okay? If you're familiar with these characters, then you're going to be able to follow along a little bit better. You with me? Okay, so let me just name them off. The first two characters, Elimelech and Naomi. And they are married, and we're going to talk a lot about them in a little bit. But they had two sons, Malone and Kilion. And then they ultimately had two wives, Orpah and Ruth. We'll tell you, we're going to explain all these in a minute. Just want you to get the names. And then Ruth's future husband, you will see that in the story, becomes this guy named Boaz. And then Boaz and Ruth have a child named Obed. Okay? Got you loaded up now? It's a lot of names, but we'll go over those names many times. So what happened is that Elimelech and Naomi lived, guess where? Bethlehem. And they were experiencing a famine. So Elimelech led his wife, Naomi, said, hey, we are getting out of Dodge. We're leaving this place, and we're going to go to Moab, and where there's some food available, and try to survive this famine. He decided to move the family, and from that area, from the Promised Land area. It's interesting, Elimelech, his name meant, my God is king. Interesting. But he in this moment wasn't living up to that name, because he was kind of trusting his own instincts instead of trusting God to make the supply. But God works through all things, amen? So his wife, her name, Naomi, means pleasant and sweet. Don't you like that? Pleasant and sweet. And so they have two sons, ultimately, and their names are Mahon and Killen. And so you know what those names mean? You ready for this? Sick and dying. Yes. Sick and dying. So if you ever have a couple of boys, don't name them that. Let me introduce you to my children. This is bird flu and this is pneumonia. It's not a good thing. So they named them sick and dying. As the story unfolds, these two boys grow up, fall in love while they're in the land of Moab. They fall in love with two Moabite women. So that's already kind of getting hairy there, because they've left the Promised Land and they've gone into a secular land in Moab, and the boys, the sons, fall in love with these two women from that land. It's a pagan culture, and they're not believers in God. But here's the crazy part of this story. And as you see this story unfold, you're going to see a lot of stuff. So, even before we get very far in the story of Ruth, in the book of Ruth, we see that Naomi's husband, Elimelech, dies. So now they're in a foreign land. Elimelech leads them into that, but he dies. We don't know how he dies. It was an old age, heart attack, got hit by a camel. We don't know. Unbelievably, though, a short time later, both of her sons die. I guess sick and dying, it wasn't a big shock, but they both died. So here's the deal. In a short order, relatively short order, these men, Elimelech and the two sons, all die, leaving 3 widows. Naomi, the mother, who, I'm sure was pretty distraught at that point, Orpah, the daughter, and Ruth. So 3 women are now in a foreign land trying to survive, and they're without the men. So Naomi decides, well, probably the best thing for me to do is to go back home. And I know these women are from Moab. I'm going to just let them stay here. And so she begins that process. But both of the daughters were also battling what to do, loneliness. And they decided, well, we're just going to go with you, Naomi. We'll go back to your homeland. Never been there, but we'll go. And about halfway on their journey back, basically Naomi says, girls, you don't need to go back with me. And you need new husbands. Go back to your hometown in Moab and find another man. And Orpah, she's like, adios. She's gone. And she goes. But the other daughter, Ruth insisted, no, Naomi, I am going to go back with you. I'm going to stay with you. I know my husband, your son, is dead and not really obligated, but I am going to go back with you. And in that moment, this is what Ruth says to Naomi. It's a familiar passage, and I use it almost in every wedding that I do. But listen to what Ruth says to Naomi. Look at chapter 1, 16 to 17. He says this, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. That's a huge statement, by the way, that that Ruth makes. Basically proclaiming her belief now in God. It says, your people will be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do to me and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. That's a huge commitment, right? Proclaiming that I'm going to go back with you, I'm going to stay with you, I'm not going to leave, I'm going to take on your God and my belief in him. Where you go, I will go. Amazing. And obviously, we know that where they're going, where are they going? Bethlehem. Yes, they're going back to Bethlehem. And all of a sudden, we get our first clue as to why this story, posted in the genealogy of Jesus, is so important for us. Bethlehem is a small town. At that point, just about a couple hundred people in Bethlehem. We even sing that song, "Oh, little town of Bethlehem." Small town. But when Naomi returns, obviously in a small town of 200 people or more, they know everything, right? They know all the things that are going on. So when Naomi shows up, it's a big thing. And remember that Naomi's name means what? Pleasant and sweet. And so when she gets back there and they start referring to her as pleasant and sweet, she says this, don't call me that anymore. My life has been bitter. Getting to see a little bit of an inside angle into Naomi at this moment. And check out verse 20. Don't call me that. Don't call me pleasant. Don't call me sweet. Call me Mara, which means bitter. Because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full with her husband and then our family. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Man, can you imagine her place? I mean, she's being very honest. I know my name means this, but don't call me that. Call me bitter, because I'm bitter right now. I went with my husband and then my sons ultimately, and then my daughter-in-laws, and we were, moving forward. Then all of a sudden, the floor drops out. And because of that floor dropping out, I'm coming back to Bethlehem, and I'm not happy. I'm pretty bitter. I want to give you a first observation about miracles. Sometimes God's miracles don't follow a logical pathway. So if you're in a pathway in any point in life that seems to not be making sense, don't panic. Don't panic. As you read Naomi's stories, basically you could say it's a story about loss. I mean, at this point, if you're watching the movie, you're like, man, this is all about loss. She lost her husband, she lost her son, she lost her home, she lost her land. And it's a story about loss. Or is it? Or is it? It could be a story about how God works miracles in the journey of the broken road. That's what it could be. If I were to give it a title based on what I've read in the passages and kind of summarize some thoughts from some theologians, yes, I could say it's really how God works miracles in the journey of the broken road. You see, this world is broken. And newsflash, so are we. So are we. But check this out. And here's an insight that I want you to grab. Brokenness, whether it's the world's brokenness or your brokenness is often the raw material that God uses for his miracles. Amen. And you got to know that. So when somebody's life is broken, in a biblical sense, no big deal. Guess what? You're on a pathway to a miracle. Really, you are. And please catch this. And this is theologically so important to catch this perspective. We need to look beyond the time and space we're living in right now to catch this. Because if we just stay stuck in this time zone, we can figure out a whole lot of ways that this brokenness doesn't make sense at all. But what we need to do is couple this span of time with the span of eternity beyond this time and link them two together, then things like brokenness and loss begin to make a little sense in the journey, because what God is always interested in, catch this, is what will ultimately matter in whatever circumstance we're talking about. And that may be resolved in this time zone or not until eternity. You got to catch that. And so we can't ever say in this time zone, God isn't a God of miracles. He does he even know I exist? Does he not know of this in my life? And this is, all those kinds of things. But what you're doing is you're not linking it with eternity. What sometimes seems and looks and smells like a defeat on earth doesn't mean that it's a defeat in eternity. You got to hold on to that, because that sometimes may be it. You may not get resolved in this time span. You may not see it until you pass on to eternity. Things on earth will not often make sense until we get to that place. I can tell you things in my own life, and you can tell me things in your life that maybe still aren't resolved. Why did this happen? Why did that person disappear? Why? And we can't get it in this time zone. But God knows. And he's worked some miracles that you may not even know he's worked till you get there. One day, maybe we'll get to sit around with him and go, God, I didn't know this is why this person was taken too soon in life. Because this and this and this happened as a result of that, which is now what we're banking on in all of eternity. He is at work. And listen, he is working his miracles even in the worst of times. For Naomi, it was a famine, moved from her home, death of a husband, death of 2 sons. But Naomi didn't stop. And she didn't walk away from God. She got mad at God, but she didn't walk away from God. She persevered. She lived a Hebrews 12 kind of faith that says this, look at this, and let us run with what? Perseverance, the race that's marked out for us. How we do that? We fix our eyes on Jesus, who is the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. He is the one we look at. And we keep our eyes on Jesus, which then means we're keeping our eye on eternity as well as this time and space that we're in right now. And in the chapter before, this Hebrews 12 kind of perseverance, listen to what happened to some people that we sort of have forgotten about. Hebrews 11 reminds us that many endured the brokenness and didn't get it resolved before they went into eternity, but now I'm sure are rejoicing with the Lord. Listen what it says in a couple verses out of chapter 11. It says, there were others who were tortured for Christ, refusing to be released. I don't want to be released. Torture me, that they might gain an even better resurrection, a better forever in eternity. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins and destitute, persecuted, mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. You see, they linked together this time with eternity. And they knew that God would resolve it beyond this time zone. David said in chapter 42, why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you disquieted within me? Put your hope in God. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. For David says, for I shall again praise him, my help and my God. Once Ruth and Naomi arrived on this adventure to Bethlehem, Ruth goes into these fields and she starts picking up grain left behind by the farmer. It was barley harvest season. So Ruth starts picking up this grain and gathering it together, and not a very glamorous job at all. And it was there that Ruth was noticed by the last main character in our story, a wealthy single guy who had never married, whose name was Boaz. He was the owner of the field. And he's out in that field, and he sees her working the field and doing what she could. And Boaz takes notice of her. Look what it says in Ruth 2:3. So she went out and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turns out, I love that phrase. As it turns out, think of where they've been. As it turns out, she found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. So Boaz, when Elimelech left the land and then ultimately died, so he took over the land. We'll see that in a minute. Observation number 2. The DNA of a miracle, listen, always includes redemption. You got to know that. You got to know it. As it turns out, Ruth finds herself right in the middle of a God-orchestrated redemptive plan. Here is a Moabite, far from God, encounters this family from Bethlehem, marries one of the sons, the father-in-law dies, the husband dies, she's in Bethlehem, first time, figuring out what I'm going to do. I'm out there just picking up grain in a field, and then all of a sudden she realizes, well, wait a minute, I've now pledged my loyalty to this God, and it seems like this God is orchestrating some redeeming kind of plan here. Boaz notices Ruth and he befriends her. And then here comes Naomi. She finds out what's going on. And then she tries to play Cupid. She says to Ruth, here's what I want you to do. Boaz is noticing you, girl, and he's single, good looking, and he is the owner of the land. Hello. Here's what I want you to do. Take a bath. Get the stinkies off of you. Put on your best perfume. Hello. And put on your prettiest clothes. Then I want you to go to the barn where Boaz is working. After he's done eating, he's going to lie down in the barn and go to sleep. And when he does, you go and lie down at his feet, and he will tell you what to do from there. Isn't that a good mama? She's actually, and that's preparing her to be his potential bride. Listen to how it's said in Scripture. Chapter 3, in the middle of the night, something startled the man Boaz. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Way to go, Naomi, getting Ruth over there. Who are you? He asked. I'm your servant, Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are, check this out, a guardian redeemer of our family. Boaz, by being now the new owner of the field, became what is called a guardian redeemer. In other words, when someone passes, the next in line in the family takes over the land as a guardian redeemer. And Boaz was the guardian redeemer for Elimelech, who passed away. And when Elimelech died, Boaz became that for the family. And when you think about what's going on here, here is Boaz, guardian redeemer, sees this Moabite woman. She's a foreigner. She's from pagan culture. And look, no man in that culture would want a woman like Ruth. But Boaz says this. I love it. I will love you who no one else will love. I will care for you who no one else will care for. I will redeem who no one else will redeem. I will be the guardian redeemer. So Ruth 4:13, Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. And soon, first there's love, then there's marriage, then there comes Ruth with a baby carriage. And little baby was Obed. Now look back at what we read earlier. Salmon was the father of who? Boaz. By who? And we're going to talk about her in a minute. Boaz, the father of, by who? Are you kidding me? This Moabite woman from a pagan culture is in the lineage of Jesus. Obed then becomes the father of Jesse, and Jesse becomes the father of King David. Take you back for a minute, bump you up a little bit in this. Go back to Salmon. Could you put that back up? Salmon was the father of Boaz. So Boaz's father came through Rahab. You say, well, who's Rahab? She is a prostitute who hid the spies when they came in to take over Jericho. And she hid the two spies, and she only asked that when they come, that they would spare her life, and they did. And she's in the lineage of Jesus. Tied into the story of Ruth through Boaz, who became the guardian redeemer. So again, verse 17. In all, then, there were 14 generations from Abraham to David, including Ruth. 14 from David to the exile of Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Christ, the Messiah. So, check out the miracles. A famine caused Elimelech and Naomi to leave Bethlehem. Elimelech and Naomi's son married two Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. The deaths of Elimelech and the two sons caused Naomi and Ruth to go back to Bethlehem. Ruth meets and marries Boaz, and they have a son, Obed. Boaz was used by God to be the guardian redeemer for Naomi and Ruth that would be used as the generational link to the ultimate guardian redeemer, Jesus. You see, a guardian redeemer is a legal term for one who has the obligation to redeem by payment or purchase. A relative who has found themselves in quite serious difficulties or often in bondage. So a redeemer would come in, and obviously seeing the plight of Naomi because of Elimelech's death, and so he steps in and he becomes a redeemer. And Jesus saw us, listen, in our bondage, in our brokenness, and came to make a payment for us and purchase what we could not redeem. Jesus, the Redeemer, the guardian redeemer for us. Thank God for the daily miracle to know that regardless of the brokenness of the world and the brokenness of our lives, we have a guardian redeemer. Not only that, but check out the fact that Jesus is prophesied to be born in Bethlehem, the home of Naomi and now Ruth. And in the prophecy in Micah, it says in chapter 5, verse 2, but you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, another word for Bethlehem, through you, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be the ruler over Israel. You said, how did Jesus get to Bethlehem? Well, Joseph, who is betrothed to Mary, is pregnant with the Messiah. And he has to travel to his hometown because of a census where his family is from. And you go back in the family archives and you see that Naomi and Ruth and then Boaz planted in Bethlehem so that they are registered in that city. That was prophesied way before them, that Jesus would be born there, that Joseph would travel there. What a miracle. What a miracle. Don't forget, it took a famine and the deaths of 3 people to make that possible. And I guarantee you today that in heaven, Amalek, Naomi, Ruth, Boaz, and Obed, now from an eternal perspective, are rejoicing at what seemed like a crazy turn of events that led to the coming of the promised Messiah. They linked it together. So what happened in this time that maybe didn't make a lot of sense led to something that did make a lot of sense when you consider the bottom line of what God was after, and that was getting his son born in this on this earth in a place called Bethlehem, so that you and I could one day experience the miracle of the guardian redeemer of all times, Jesus. They are firm believers, I believe, from heaven today in Romans 8:28, where it says, we know that in all things God works together for the good to those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And they're, I'm sure, repeatedly in heaven are saying, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can't even count them all. Because look what's in heaven today from their perspective because of what happened and transpired on the earth, that we were able to see and continue to see the miracles upon miracles upon miracles. You know, for me, I get to see miracles, not only the common ones, but the big ones. I get to see them weekly at a place called the Transformation Center, where yesterday 244 families came through that place. And they received food, clothing. They walked away with a smile. When we saw last week 603 families have a Thanksgiving family dinner because of God and his miracles. This Saturday we'll see 500 children get toys. It's just God. But we've taken today our 250 breaths. That oxygen atom has traveled 100,000 miles inside your body so that you can check your blood oxygen, and hopefully it's above 90 because it's doing its thing and it's traveling the way it should travel. What a miracle. What I want to do right now is we end this moment, and I want to end it differently. I want you to think about the miracles in your life. And like David, I want you to thank him for them. Because when we get beat down by circumstances and brokenness, we can fall into a funk like Naomi and get bitter. Or we can get better. When we link it together with all of eternity, we say, God, I don't know the purpose right now, but I know you have one. I don't know the miracle right now, but I know there is one. And I want to be faithful to you, and so I want to persevere like Naomi, and I want to get to the other side of this, and I want to keep my eyes focused on you, and you're my guardian redeemer. And you're the one of many, many miracles. So I would invite you just to close your eyes. And I want you to think about the miracles of God. The many, many miracles. Even some of those things that happen on the worst day. How God is carrying you through that. Allowing you to persevere. And as you think of those miracles, let's just sing this to the Lord. Right where you're seated, just sing it to the Lord. This is our prayer and our worship.